Hello and welcome to our webinar today. Today's topic is multicultural sensitivity, and our presenter today is Don Mitkus. If you would like to see any other topic covered in one of our webinars, or if you'd like to join our Student Assistance Center group site, please don't hesitate to email me at dale.gasparovic@prevention.org. Also, you can follow us on Twitter for announcements of our webinars and also other training events that may be coming up, as well as additional information on topics related to student assistance. Without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to our presenter today, Don Mitkus. Don, it's coming your way now.
All right, thank you, Dale. As Dale said, my name's Don Mitkus. I'm a consultant with the Student Assistance Center at Prevention First, and today's topic is multicultural sensitivity. Now, this is a topic that has gone through evolution over the years, and and takes many forms. So, what we're really going to be focusing on today is not so much focusing on specific cultures, but more a general sense of how to be sensitive to cultural differences and how that can be implemented in a classroom or in a group setting. So, reality is, just an initial point, reality is perception from our point of view. Our perceptions are reinforced by what we've been taught. It creates a lens. So here's a perceptual set. Imagine, here's a scenario for you. Imagine you're witnessing a prehistoric scene, prehistoric times, and in a cave, a group is gathered around a glowing fire. One of the group picks up a piece of charcoal from the fire and goes over to the wall and begins drawing. Suddenly, shapes of animals and humans are drawn, and a new form of human communication begins, the written word. Can you see it? Visualize it? For how many of you was the artist a woman? So when we think of prehistoric times, we talk about the cavemen. We don't talk about the cave women, do we? So it's our perception is skewed by what we've been taught. When we see pictures or artist renderings of those first cave drawings being completed, it's often a man. Predominantly, I don't know if I've ever seen a picture of a prehistoric female doing this sort of artwork or written form of communication. So it's reinforced by what we're taught. So here's some objectives today. Why does diversity matter? Does it support student learning and development? Why and how? What's cultural competence? And can someone develop cultural competence? So some things that we know and that have been studies, that diversity has a positive effect on students' cognitive development, satisfaction with, this is particular for a college study, college experience and leadership abilities, and students who interact with diverse peers, racially and ethnically, show greater intellectual growth and academic skills. So it's both in-class and out-of-class interactions and involvement with diverse peers foster critical thinking. So the point is that diversity is valuable. Diversity creates greater chances for understanding and empathy and different worldviews and points of view, whereas we, in our own personal cultural upbringing, view the world by how we've been taught, so have others from other cultures and ethnic backgrounds and with different types of diversity. They've learned how to view the world through their particular environment and upbringing, and by interacting with those folks, we expand our view, potentially, if we're rational human beings, increase our worldview. And these students that have a diverse population of peers tend to have greater critical thinking skills. So Yes.
Just to that point, I think also there is some value in looking at that not just from um, an ethnic cultural background, but also just the geographic culture of folks,
The
urban, rural, etc.
And we'll take a look at what kind of there are different types of diversity, and we'll take a look at that in a little bit. It's not just ethnicity, and that's part of the point of multicultural sensitivity, is that it means being more than just sensitive to someone's uh, ethnic heritage. There are other factors that we need to look at in regards to diversity, or diversity within a person, or the diverse and the diverse, which we'll cover in a second. Um, so again, just to kind of drive the point home, it capitalizes on the unique experience and common wisdom of all cultures by providing a ground where comparison and contrast can be explored. Um, we can find that there are similarities, and from that similarities we can explore the differences and get new perspectives and meaning. It's for a total educational experience, according to this particular educator. Diversity is an enriching and necessary component of a total educational experience. So developing cross-cultural competence it starts with developing an awareness of one's own culture and existence, sensations, thoughts, environment. It starts with self-reflection. If we are not aware of our own, the aspects of our own culture, we can't expect to know how you can't expect to effectively engage someone to learn about theirs, and to learn about our own, and we'll talk about this in a second, conscious and unconscious biases. So also develop, the next step from that is accepting and respecting cultural differences and resisting judgmental attitudes. There have been, entire ethnic groups that have been wiped out or nearly wiped out simply because they were different, and that different is not good. We have to be open to cultural encounters. We have to when they present themselves, we have to be intellectually curious about them, and then gaining comfortability with cultural encounters, with things that are not necessarily doing things that we're not necessarily used to, or might be anxiety provoking. But in order to develop cross-cultural competence, you have to start with your own awareness, and then resisting the impulsive things that we've been taught in our environment, and also be willing to reach out and engage. So it's not acquired quickly. It requires intentional examination of one's thoughts and behaviors. And the first step toward becoming culturally competent is realizing that you probably aren't. And that's for as an educator or as a therapist, we tend to think of ourselves as fairly, most of us, as open people and accepting. But it's, unless we actually go through that process of self-reflection about our own culture and background and beliefs and biases, we won't be effectively culturally competent. So it includes having the capacity to value diversity, conduct the self-assessment, as we talked about, manage the dynamics of difference, how that different cultures coming together in discussion and communication there can be disagreements or about particular aspects of whatever. Acquire an institutionalized cultural knowledge. So being curious and finding out if you're working in a school or in a setting where there's a ethnic or cultural group different than your own, to be effective with that group, it does behoove you to do some research, either by playing Columbo with that individual from another culture and asking questions. But teach me about it. Teach me about your culture. Tell me about it. Or doing some research on, online or in books, reading books about different cultures, etc. And then adapting to the diversity and cultural context of individuals and communities served. If you're, if you are of a particular ethnic background and you are working in an environment with a different ethnic background, you have to be able to navigate it particularly if that's the predominant ethnic culture in that school or in that community. So if you're like myself, middle-aged white male, and find yourself working in a school that is predominantly Hispanic, first and second generation, you better learn how you're going to be able to effectively engage with those folks by learning what their cultural values are. Or else you'll have a very difficult time in engaging the students and or the parents or family members or caretakers in a way that will get a student's needs met, either educational or socially, emotionally. So making diversity more inclusive. Culture is often viewed in the U.S. as being primarily related to race, ethnicity, and gender. There's effective diversity and inclusivity programs must also address other kinds of diversity that could potentially lead to marginalization and or exclusion. So the Beverly Tatum, who's done a lot of work in multicultural sensitivity, written a lot of stuff, identifies 7 kinds of diversity. There's race, ethnicity, gender, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, age, and physical/mental ability. And then the isms that go along with that: racism, sexism, religious oppression, heterosexism, classism, ageism, and ableism. So these are things, areas of diversity that we need to be aware of. Attention to diversity might even be perceived as divisive or inhibiting community. So a strategy to counter the divisive perceptions of diversity is to broaden our definition of diversity in ways that highlight the intersectionality of race, ethnicity, gender, class, religion, et cetera, within a framework of marginalization and justice. Not just to say that this particular group is marginalized, but to say, look, we're not this culture, this environment, this particular school is not going to accede to or is not going to condone any form of marginalization. And if a person is marginalized based on a particular type because of race, gender, etc., there will be a system of rectifying that, a system of justice for that particular individual. So that it takes it out of the realm of that this particular group is being put down, this particular group is being marginalized. If someone is marginalized, period, it's the act of marginalization that should be focused on versus focusing on one particular group. So in people from the same ethnic or racial group can also be diverse in other ways within that group. So the diversity in the diverse, so that you can have someone who's Hispanic that is of a higher socioeconomic status or lower, has gone and completed college, has not completed high school, older, younger, sexual orientation. So there's diversity within groups as well. So even if you have an ethnically or racially homogenous school, within that homogenous group, there are areas of diversity that can be grounds for that could cause marginalization.
Hey, Don.
Yeah.
I think an important point here is that equalization does not necessarily mean diversity and respecting diversity. I hear a lot of times in various contexts, well, we don't see color here. And that manages to equalize things, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're sensitive to the cultural differences.
No, and in fact, it's saying taking a stance of we don't see color here is typically the stance taken by the majority culture, the majority ethnic group, who's not necessarily subject to the marginalization that occurs in the minority groups in that area. So it's often short-sighted to say we don't see color because what I might be able to the barriers that I might face as a white middle-aged male are far different than someone who is African American and 22 years old and from an urban environment. Their challenges, we might have equal brain power and intellect and talents and capabilities, but the chances, the opportunities that some person's going to have because of how they, and we're going to talk a little bit about this in a little bit, but how they're marginalized versus someone like me who's not been marginalized because I've been in the majority group. It's far different. So, and there needs to be an awareness of that as well, so we're not unconsciously activating those self-defeating beliefs that can develop as someone who's in a minority group. So when we talk about being open to other experiences and other cultures and reaching out, we don't want to ask someone to go out of their comfort zone. What we want to do is actually expand their comfort zone, expand and stretch them to develop a comfortability with other cultures and with other diverse groups, because that's when, as it says there, that's where the magic happens, is when you stretch out of your comfort zone, to there's an intersection with another intersection in an understanding and an appreciation of another culture. So again, challenge and support them to stretch their comfort zone, not necessarily to just get out of it. Getting outside your comfort zone is anxiety provoking, and when you're anxious, you're not necessarily focused on others, you're very much focused on yourself. So talk instead about how they can stretch to become more comfortable with other cultures and other experiences. And diversity and inclusivity is it's about understanding. It's not necessarily agreeing, but understanding where that other culture is coming from. It doesn't make the difference go away. However, the person who understands how difference causes communication to break down, understanding that sort of how the difference can be a barrier in communication, can work towards overcoming that barrier or breaking through that barrier. So just here's some terms to define nationality. The status of belonging to a particular nation by virtue of origin, birth, or naturalization. Ethnic group is a sizable group of people sharing a common and distinctive racial, national, religious, linguistic, or cultural heritage. And race. Human population distinguishes a more or less distinct group by genetically transmitted physical characteristics. So racial characteristics are really very minor variations among groups. Racial characteristics, which are surface, account for about 0.01% of human biological variation. And the concept of race was invented in the 18th century. Prior to that, there was not. It wasn't defined in that way, and it's in a way that racial traits are culturally determined, and race and racism have always been connected by classifying someone based on skin color or other skin deep properties, eye shape, skin color, hair type. It's a pseudo-biological concept that's been used to justify and rationalize the unequal treatment of groups of people by others. So the concept of race has been used as a way to put down or to gain control over groups of people based simply on very, very minor differences. So Science suggests that differences that set us apart are not racial. They are more likely to be cultural or learned. The only reason people think differences are major is because we've been brought up in our culture, in a culture that has taught us to see differences in this way. That lens that we're taught from our environment and family and such. The problem emerges because we live in a world that encourages people to use differences to include or exclude, reward or punish, credit or discredit, elevate, oppress, value, devalue, leave alone or harass. So it's the focusing on minor differences to gain a position of power, so to speak, is really caused a division amongst groups of folks that have very minor differences genetically between them. So culture is learned. You're not born with culture. Culture is not embedded in our genes. The iceberg of culture is the things that we see are the minor things, the face, the music, language, food, art, clothes, but the stuff that's underneath the surface, political beliefs, religious beliefs, beliefs about men and women, gender roles, values, attitudes about family. These are things that are harder to see on the surface. These things, these above the water things, are things that are learned or taught. Culture is first learned in the family, then in school, then in communities and other social organizations such as the church. So it's hard to recognize your own culture and cultural assumptions because they're part of us. It's something that we've grown with and grown into over our lifetime. So, which is why the process of self-examination is a pretty rigorous process. Here's some implicit cultural assumptions that in North American culture we believe we're egalitarian, we can control the environment, we're future-oriented and informal, we're direct in our communications, we value our youth, friendliness, optimism, action-oriented, change now, and our way, we're ethnocentric in this way. Our way is the best way. American pride, right? Other cultures their implicit cultural assumptions can include that there's a hierarchy, that there are those that are higher and those that are lower, and that is the way of things. Belief in fate, that's really not much you can do to change what's going to happen to you. And rather than being future-oriented, are very much focused on the present, can be very formal in their communications. Could be very indirect, could be valuing age versus valuing youth, more closed to strangers, could be fatalistic, change takes time. And their ethnocentric belief could be our way is the only way, and all others are wrong. So whereas in North America we might say that our way is the best way, but other people have other ways, and we're going to respect that. But other countries and cultures can say our way is the only way, and if you're not following our way, you are wrong. So what's below the surface? Things about men and women, gender roles, political beliefs, attitudes about family and proxemics and values. It's absorbed and acquired from our environment, and it's much harder to change. These are things that we've absorbed over a lifetime and become part of the fabric of our belief system and the lens that we view the world through. So these are things that take a little bit more digging to be able to examine. It also takes a little bit more digging to have an understanding of what those things are with other cultures, other diverse cultures. So our attitudes towards race, gender, and other diversity operate at two levels: the conscious level, what we choose to believe, and the unconscious level, which is the immediate automatic associations that just kind of pop out or pop to mind before we've really had a time to kind of think about it and say, is this right? So in creating culturally inclusive classroom environments, A culturally inclusive classroom is a place where students and staff alike recognize, appreciate, and capitalize on diversity so as to enrich the overall learning experience. Like we talked about before, a diverse classroom is a classroom that creates greater critical thinking and creates a more rich educational experience. That culturally inclusive classroom encourages all individuals, regardless of age, gender, ethnicity, religious affiliation, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, political beliefs, to develop personal contacts and effective intercultural skills. That values that all cultures, that all diversity has value, and that just because someone belongs to a different culture doesn't mean that they're wrong, or that their way is not the best way. Simply that to be curious and to gain some insight and understanding of another culture serves a significant educational value. So where you have an intersection of these four factors, where as a teacher you positively interact with students, you actively discourage classroom incivilities, meaning if someone is using slang terms or words that are culturally insensitive, that you're on top of that and reining that in. Letting the class know that those aren't acceptable things to be said or done. Encourage open, honest, and respectful class discussion, and using inclusive language and appropriate modes of address. So if based on someone's culture will determine how they're respectfully addressed. So when you have these four things intersecting, you have a culturally inclusive classroom. So people who expand or stretch their comfort zone to include more people and experiences often report more complete, rewarding, and successful lives during college and beyond. So again, speaking to the value of encouraging our students to stretch their comfort zones to include and be inclusive of diverse populations. So it's important to engage the majority students, provide majority students with avenues to enhance their cross-cultural competencies and encourage their active participation and engagement with diverse populations. When you're a majority student, when you're part of the majority culture in a school, in a community, those biases can sometimes be even more difficult to kind of dig up and dig into, because you've been reinforced from a very early age that your culture is the dominant culture, so it's the right one. So it can be even harder to recognize when there are biases when you're part of the majority culture. So for multicultural students, those in the minority groups, encourage them to invite friends outside your identity groups to come with you to events and activities. Give them the opportunity to learn. It may also give them some insight into what it's like to be the minority in a group. Inviting a Caucasian friend to a quinceañera can be a very eye-opening experience. It gives a window into the Hispanic culture and rite of passage, and also having being in an environment where you get to experience what it's like to not speak the dominant language, perhaps, and having to navigate that socially. It provides some insight into what folks who are in the minority cultures are experiencing. So, and for all students, we need to challenge racist, sexist, homo-negative comments and jokes that demean others. Racism and other forms of discrimination may persevere in part because people who anticipate feeling upset, and believe that they will take action when faced with an act of intolerance, may actually respond with indifference. When you don't speak up, when negative comments are being made or jokes are being made that demean others, whether that is intentional or unintentional as far as the intent of the joke or the comment, the impact can be significant if no one steps up and says, "Hey, that's insensitive, and that's something that we're not going to do in this classroom. And if you do, there will be a consequence or a repercussion for that." So it's in order to help students enhance their cultural competence, we really do need to let them know what the limits are, what is acceptable and unacceptable language. So the ability to successfully teach students coming from different cultures entails mastering our own personal and interpersonal awareness and sensitivities, learning specific bodies of cultural knowledge, the cultural knowledge about the cultures of students that you'll be working with, and mastering a set of skills that underlie effective cross-cultural teaching. Cultural Competence by Diller and Mule is a good resource here. I encourage you to look it up, and it's a good guide for culturally competent teaching. So identity and stereotype threat. Our social identities come from a variety of places: our race, sex, age, political affiliation, medical diagnoses, high schools, colleges, even our favorite teams. Each of those identities, I'm a White Sox fan, so that says something to someone who is a Chicago Cubs fan. I might be stereotyped in a particular way because of the fact that I'm a Sox fan. So each of the identities comes along with a set of expectations, labels, or stereotypes. When students are reminded, however subtly, about negative stereotypes about their group, such as women or students of color performing stereotyped as performing poorly in math, they do in fact perform more poorly. So stereotype threat affects the ability to function effectively. So it affects the ability to use our mind in an effective manner by increasing performance worsening rumination, impairing working memory, and activating worry circuits in the brain or anxiety circuits in the brain versus reasoning or critical thinking circuits in the brain. These reactions interfere with performance. So if the expectation of the implicit expectation in the classroom is that this group does well in math, this group does not do well in math, whether or not there's any evidence to that fact, our own insensitivities to that can cause a triggering of an anxiety response that I can't do this. I can't do math because I'm a girl, because I'm stupid, because I'm from a particular socioeconomic group. I can't do this. Whether or not they have the ability or the talent to do so, it becomes something of self-fulfilling prophecy. So we have to be very careful about stereotyping particular groups and reinforcing those stereotypes of those groups. So it's a concept we call internalized oppression. So a member of the stereotyped group comes to believe in the truth of the stereotype to some degree. And if they believe that stereotype, if they believe because they're part of a particular group that they are that they have this limitation, they can come to believe it and will, because of that, perform poorly in that area, and because of that, reinforce that stereotypical belief, and it becomes, like I said, a self-fulfilling prophecy. So self-attributions of low ability as well as low ability attributions of faculty and staff can adversely affect the extent to which students become fully engaged in learning. So we not only have to be aware of what of what we're stereotyping others, but we also need to be aware of how they may be absorbing that stereotype and how it might be impacting their performance, and do some work to help rectify that situation. And staff can become these stereotypes can affect how they can become fully engaged in supporting students to succeed at a task. Well, this kid's just stupid. Everyone's coming up. That's, his whole family's stupid. The neighborhood he's from is full of stupid people. So, we have very low expectations for this kid, and, so we don't have to work very hard with him, because you know what? No matter what we do, he's not going to get it. That's the sort of thing that can that's if that's the belief of the faculty, of the staff, of the school, and this kid has been hearing that all along throughout his life, no matter what his ability actually is, he's going to believe he is stupid and can't succeed educationally. And we, as an educational institution, can unwittingly reinforce that by our own attitudes and beliefs about a stereotype. So even though students might be highly prepared, the anxiety they experience from worrying whether their peers and teachers believe stereotypes to be true is distressful enough to lower performance. So reducing the stereotype threat. The negative effects of stereotype threat can be lessened when educators challenge themselves, again, self-reflection, to understand the impact of stereotype threat and model non-stereotypical behavior towards students. Again, it comes back to, you have to do that self-reflection. What are my biases? What are the stereotypes that I consciously or unconsciously buy into, and challenging those, because it can impact how you interact with a student, and it can impact how that student feels about themselves and their feelings of self-worth and self-efficacy. So once we've formed unconscious judgments or stereotypes, they usually won't change unless we take the time to examine and consciously consider their accuracy. So Tom Brown, who does a lot of work in cultural sensitivity, said this is what it truly means to be a student and a scholar. So again, it comes back to, got to start with self-reflection and look at kind of dig into whether or not we have some unconscious judgments about particular groups or particular students. So a safe classroom climate. A safe classroom is one where discussion and disagreement are acceptable, where established rules of discourse are followed by everyone, especially the instructor. You have to model good behavior. Students may need to be reminded of ground rules from time to time, and once students have reached consensus on a particular point, acknowledge this and agree to move on so they don't recycle arguments over old ground. It may be necessary to, and again, having the expectations outlined, it might be necessary to call timeouts to allow emotions to cool. Ask students to summarize the discussion and write down their own thoughts so these can be shared to restart the discussion at a time when perhaps if emotions have been riled up, that they've calmed down and rational discourse can be re-engaged in. And reserve time to wrap up the session, wherein students report what they've learned and examine conclusions drawn from the exchange. Too many students and perhaps faculty understand the goal of debate in the classroom to be to convince other students and fellow citizens of their views. Critical thinking should be a tool not merely for exposing flaws in others' arguments, but for reflection on one's own assumptions, and most importantly, strengthening one's own understanding. So critical thinking should not just be a tool that's pointed at others and picking apart others' beliefs and arguments. It should also be used when presented with new information to take a look at our own assumptions and values to see whether or not they need adjustment or adaptation or to evolve. In communication, to listen more. Key element in learning from those who are different from you is to listen to their feelings, especially their feelings of being, quote, the other, end quote, in some area of their lives. Listen. Again, listen. You can't learn unless the ears are open and the mouth shut, right? That's what we tell our students. ears open. So when having a discussion or trying to gain some understanding of someone else's culture, it's important that you are actively listening to what they're telling you and examining it. So as soon as we think we're right about something, we narrow our focus, attending only to the details that support our belief, or we cease listening altogether. So once we're convinced, you know what, we are right. I am right about this. It makes us less prone to engage in discourse about other beliefs and other cultures, and makes it less likely that we will listen if we come from or if we're having a discussion through a lens of, well, I'm right. My belief is right. You might tell me about yours, but I know I'm right. We close ourselves off to the opportunity to grow and learn.
Don, that particular point, I think, is particularly important in our current kind of political environment on both sides of the spectrum, really, because for too long we've spent a lot of time thinking we're right on either side of that political discussion, and not enough time listening.
Correct, and the amount of anxiety that our students, not just high school students that might be more politically aware or active, but even our elementary, our lower school students are being impacted by this discourse, by the animosity of this discourse, because both sides have very strong proponents that they are right, and there's not much discourse across the aisle, so to speak. So it's incumbent on us to model that that's not inclusive. It's not giving an opportunity to learn or to appreciate what others might bring to the table, and that we need to be open in our discourse and open to other viewpoints. Because your very good point right now, it's very much prevalent, the intolerance of other people's beliefs, and that is being modeled from the very top on both sides of the aisle. So it's ever more important that we are working towards creating a sense of inclusivity to diverse cultures and beliefs in our children, because they're going to be inheriting this particular mess. So that's the point. There's a chance you're both right. There's a chance that both sides have something of value to bring to the table, and perception's reality. So civility in the classroom, be proactive, have expectations laid out right from the beginning, expectations for behavior that go right along with academic expectations for that classroom. Be a role model. How you act is a powerful representation in how the faculty treats students, how staff treats students. If you model inclusivity, the students are more likely to follow suit. Ask why. Seek to have students explain their behavior and put it into context. Have a plan to respond to the unexpected. Follow through on your plans for action. And document incidences in your response there. That's more for self-reflection than anything. So as a member of a school community, you have the responsibility to contribute to creating an environment wherein all people feel safe to be themselves. When you're about to make a comment or take an action, imagine what would happen if you asked yourself a simple question. Is what I am about to say or do going to bring me closer to this person, or is it going to drive us further apart? And with that, I've listed my email address here. Please do feel free, if you do have questions about this particular topic, to email me. Happy to answer any questions you might have. If I don't know, and there's a lot of things I don't know, I'd be happy to find out that information for you. I look forward to our future webinar series, and thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you so much, Don. Again, if you want to give some suggestions on other webinar topics, please don't hesitate to email me at dale.gasparovic@prevention.org, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thank you.